Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining our webinar, the Retail Business Transformation. Today, we're going to take a look at the retail technology landscape within the Asia Pacific region and explore some of the ways that organisations can prepare themselves for future developments. Today, we're going to be joined by three experts in the field. We've got Linus Lai from IDC, Paul Dearlove from Google, and Vishal Garawala from SUSE. So before we begin, I'd just like to take care of a little housekeeping. So I'd like to inform you that the session is being recorded, so you will have access to an on-demand version at a later date. And we will be running a Q&A session at the end. So we'd encourage you to submit your questions through the questions link in the GoToWebinar platform. And we'll attempt to answer as many questions as we can in the Q&A session at the end. So now I have the pleasure of introducing Linus Lai from IDC. Linus is the VP for Software and Services Asia Pacific for IDC. He has over 25 years of experience and leads IDC's research programs in DevOps, cloud software and services sourcing. He's a founding member of IDC Global's Future of Digital Innovation Council, and he's on the judging panel of the IDG Australia's CIO 50. I'd now like to hand you over to Linus.
Thank you, Colin. I'll just take control of the slides. And thanks everyone for being here today. I do want to talk a little bit about what's been happening in the retail sector, particularly with technology adoption in this sector. If we could advance the slide, please. I'll try to do that. Thank you. I want to start by a prediction, and the prediction that I have here states that by the end of this year, retailers would accelerate their digital transformation programs by 2 years in 2 months by embracing cloud-first principles, third-party services, and system integration partnerships. The ability to rapidly deploy digital innovation is the key to survival. We've seen what had happened over the last 12 months or so, and we know that for many, many retailers, they've had a really, good rethink about their supply chain, their capabilities in e-commerce and omni-channel as well. So let me talk a little bit about why this crisis is different. And this crisis is different because compared to all the other crises in the past, this is the one crisis we actually saw IT spending did not dip below GDP growth. And this is quite remarkable because, as you know, for many retailers, by pivoting and shifting to the digital space, they've actually, in some cases, done even better than when they had physical stores. Now, all this is done not just through the huge movement of work from home, but again, through very massive transformation capabilities from the front office to the back office. As we are now coming out of the brunt of the pandemic, and in some countries, I know we're still undergoing some lockdowns, particularly here where some of us are in Sydney. I would say that looking at the types of technology investments, we're now accelerating cloud for digital innovation. We're looking at leveraging cloud for new cloud-native applications. We're exploring how users of data analytics and AI and ML models can help even transform business models and even transform customer engagement models as well. So we're now moved on from that panic mode that we had a couple of months ago where we were scrambling for resources and just driving new capabilities all the time. We now have a chance to really rethink about how we can actually transform the entire business itself. If we could move to the next slide, please. And one of the things that we see in the retail sector is a couple of strategic priorities, and I've listed 5 of them here because these are the ones that are actually the ones that are priority for the retail sector today. And let me go through each one of them one by one. The first one is the digital supply chain optimization. That's the one in purple. And very interestingly, this not just covers, last mile delivery, challenges, but right now there's a lot of interest in sustainability, and where you get your goods from. In the next one, in the orange area, we have operational scale and agility. This is all about, driving, that operations at scale in the digital realm, right? Using anything that you have from warehousing, mobile technologies, IoT, etc. In the omni-channel experience, this is one that's always time and again, been highlighted by customers and retailers, that this is something that they really want to get right, because this is the foundation of most of where the customer experience and touch points happen. Having the consistency of the experience means that having the consistency in the data as well that, each of the touch points have. And in the next area, in the light blue area, is a curated merchandise lifecycle management. Again, this is not just to do with the product and the SKUs, but it's also to do with product lifecycle management, as well as pricing lifecycle management as well. And lastly, when it comes to omni experience customer engagement, it's engaging your customers, obviously, not just at the point of sale, but what happens throughout the life cycle of the customer as well, even after the point of sale as well. And again, driving, software capabilities and data and analytics insights, throughout the customer life cycle, and having the customer intelligence is going to be so important in this area. If you could move to the next slide, please. So the top challenges facing the retail industry today is reducing real estate assets. That's a real challenge, and we've seen some organizations do that. Ecosystem partner fulfillment, that's driving, all of your supply chain partners towards a common goal. Leveraging data monetization capabilities. So a lot of retailers now at a stage where they've done tremendous amounts of functional and productivity upgrades, I would say. But now there's a chance actually to look at how data platforms and sharing data as well with ecosystem partners can drive new value and new applications for customer experiences. And then lastly, the cost of IT systems as well is actually quite a big challenge. And let me explore that in a little bit more detail, because I think this is something that needs to be discussed a little bit more. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about innovation in this sector particularly, because when we think about a survey that we ran quite recently, in fact, this was just run last month, and we asked them, as a result of their digital transformation investments, which was, what did you experience as a result of this investments? Innovation came out number one, and employee productivity and operational efficiency came up number 2 and 3. Now, you normally think about revenue or cost savings, as a result of these types of surveys, but I'm glad that innovation came out to be number one, because this is going to be key to retailer success and survival, in fact. If we could move to the next slide, please. So when we take a look at the retail sector in general across the Asia Pacific region, we know that when we take a look at their budget spend, most of their IT budget spend today is actually spent on what I would term as operational budget, where that's about 74% of that, where only 26% is spent on innovation budget. Right? And when we take a look at how we split that 26% out, you've got technology 37%, product 35%, and services 28%. Now, we all acknowledge that this is not enough, because 26% is kind of low, and we all like to arrive at least even half of operations and half of innovation, right? Next slide, please. And when you take a look at the targeted areas, right, for digital transformation, innovation, and with that little budget that we have, right, you can see that there are two very distinct areas for investment. One is in the supply chain and operation outcomes, and another is in the customer and product outcomes, right? In the supply chain and operations outcomes, the top three are intelligent fulfillment, connected workforce, and secure omni-channel operations. In the customer and product outcomes, the top three are customer experience analytics, product innovation, and seamless and frictionless commerce. So these are the top areas that we're trying to achieve right now when it comes to innovation. Next slide, please. Of course, innovation is not a means to an end itself. It's actually, it's driving, you know, what is a revenue outcome at the end of the day. And you've got not just revenue outcomes, but you've got reduced inventory cost outcomes and reduced operational cost outcomes. So it does impact on the top line and the bottom line as well. Next slide, please. Now, there are four major areas of innovation investments. The first area is in the area of driving new applications, and this is what we call the app explosion. In the second area is in the area of data and insights, and that's really using data to drive, you know, and not just customer experience outcomes, but operational outcomes as well. The third area is the use of clouds, right, to drive, you know, capabilities way beyond what we have today, right up to the edge as well, and to where customers are located. And then lastly, in the area of trust as well, to you know, investments that are really geared towards increasing trust, right, in your brands, in your technology outcomes, in your dealings with customers. The customers feel safe in transacting with you in the digital space. Next slide, please. As we move towards cloud as well, we see a couple of things happening here. On the left are the top business reasons why we're moving to cloud, and on the right are the benefits that we've accrued from cloud. So cloud in the past used to all be about cost savings. Well, it still is, but it's supporting business growth as well. It's improving customer experience, and there's also faster app modernization. From a benefits accrued as well, when we looked at our surveys, cloud has also helped to improve business process, increase revenues. It has helped to reduce capital expenditure and IT costs. It has helped deliver superior customer experience and shorten app development cycles as well. So this is, I think, fundamental to the shift to cloud, and it's not just a cost discussion anymore. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Cloud is, in fact, what we would term now as a platform for digital innovation, right? And during the pandemic, we saw a huge shift of more workloads and more data into the cloud. And we asked each of you, why did you do so? So the number one answer was it's a platform for digital innovation. That's where you build, obviously, new services and new capabilities. But the second reason is also very interesting to me, because you're investing more in cloud data management to drive value from data. So data is no longer locked in your data centers. You use cloud to get access to innovative ecosystems as well, you know, and to drive an ecosystem value chain as well. So this is very interesting reasons that customers are moving to cloud right now. Let's move to the next slide, please. One of the most important things I think that's going to happen is as we shift more of our enterprise applications to cloud, think of your ERP applications, for example, is that the fact that we're no longer taking our legacy enterprise applications and just, just putting them into the cloud, but we're actually thinking about how we're going to drive standardization in these package applications as well. We're using these opportunities to drive business model transformation to ensure that the business uses the package applications as is without too much customization. Now, as a result, then you might ask, where does all the competitive advantage come from? The competitive advantage comes from the ability then to drive new applications, new use cases from the data, and new microservices from these types of use cases. I've got two very simple examples here. As we saw in the pandemic, there was a need for real-time cash position or need for unified spend control. And we could use this, very simply put, by using various models of ERP in the cloud and using the data from those modules to arrive at real-time cash position or unified business spend control. And this is an agility that we've not seen before, and we have to thank cloud for this being able to happen. Next slide, please. So in ending my presentation, I just want to highlight a couple of things here. I want to talk about driving resiliency in the business and how a rethink about application modernization and digital infrastructure resiliency is needed for the retail sector right now. Very often we try to renovate what I would term as the front office in terms of the types of applications and e-commerce facing and commerce facing websites. But then we also need to think about how it needs to be integrated with the back office in order for the real digital experiences to be fulfilled, right? The second area is in driving innovation. The more that you can simplify and run IT, the more that we can divert it to innovation. In the third area is the apps and data. Modernizing applications and moving data into the cloud is a very key strategic imperative right now for many retailers. And the whole idea is to unlock the value from the data to drive new applications and customer experiences as well. The fourth area is very clearly you've told us that cloud is the foundation for innovation, and it allows you to develop new applications for digital business needs. And lastly, but not least, is the capability and culture needed for cloud operations, cybersecurity, and applications management as you move more of your estate to the cloud. So with that, thank you so much for your time, and I'll pass it over back to you, Colin.
Okay. Thanks, Linus, for some great insight into the retail technology landscape, and that sets us up nicely for our next speaker. I'd like to now introduce our second speaker for the day, Paul Dearlove. Paul is the SAP specialist at Google Cloud and is based in Sydney. Prior to joining Google Cloud, Paul spent nearly 8 years at SAP, where he was head of SAP's digital core business across Australia and New Zealand. And prior to that, he was the GM of retail and consumer goods. I'd now like to hand you over to Paul, who's going to talk about the use of big data in retail. Does your organisation have the foundations to manage it? Paul, can you, are you ready to go?
Absolutely. Thanks, Colin. And thank you, Linus, too. I mean, some of the themes in Linus's presentation there, innovation, resilience, modernising apps, but I think core to it that we picked up was the focus on innovation. And it's a nice segue through to what Google thinks in this space. But Linus also spoke about challenges facing organisations. And in terms of the retail environment at the moment, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know. COVID has had a massive impact. There's a lack of agility with legacy systems. There are security breaches. And fundamentally, how do you free up budget to address these kind of things? So these are the problems that this audience are going to be trying to solve. Now, speaking of problems, I heard quite a funny story recently about different ways to solve problems. So there's a good friend of mine, and I won't name him because this is quite a big audience, but he's a German guy I know from my SAP days. And he told me a story about last Valentine's Day. And his wife had mentioned previously that, although it's lovely to get some attention on one day of the year, it'd be nice to get it more often. And in particular, to be told that she was loved and she was appreciated for what she was doing. So he's a pragmatist, and being a pragmatist, he decided he'd record his voice and saying that I love you to his wife and set it as her morning alarm. So as far as he was concerned, problem solved, but not quite meeting her expectations, and she didn't agree with him having solved that problem. Now, this isn't at all to have a go at Germans, and I spent a long time at SAP. I know SAP and SUSE are both German companies and are sponsoring this event. It's more about flagging that there are different ways to solve problems, and your approach to solving a problem, it might not be exactly what the customer had in mind or what your colleagues had in mind. So let's come to how Google, SUSE, and SAP are solving problems. So we'll come back to it in a couple of minutes, but want to make sure that everyone's feeling fresh. Let's do a quick quiz to set this up. I know this is a virtual audience and we can't, it works a lot better in person, but let's try this anyway. So click through to the next slide, please, Colin. How many hours of video do you think are uploaded to YouTube every minute? So how many hours every minute? Now, you'll all likely know that YouTube's a part of Google. Show us the answer, please, Colin. If you said D, if you said 500, you're spot on. Now, why do I tell you that? Because when it comes to big data, like really big data, ingesting, managing, categorizing all those high-res videos, making sure that your kids aren't seeing, that you aren't seeing things that you don't want to see, making sure there's no latency, making sure there's no buffering. These are all challenges that require an extraordinary global infrastructure. And we'll come to Google and we'll come to SUSE in just a second. Next question, please, Colin. So how many messages will a standard IoT sensor generate in a year? So what do you think? The answer is about 2,000 messages a second. So click through. For those that can do maths quickly in your head, that's 62 billion messages a year. Now think about the future. And as retailers, think about all those potential sensors that are going to be feeding back information into your systems. You're going to have sensor data from devices, from employees, from customers, your supply chain, your delivery trucks, or your 3PLs. All of that data is going to be flowing back to you. And what about smart buildings? What about those smart stores? So data it's massive now. It's going to get exponentially bigger every year. And the question for you is, are you ready for that data future? So last question, please, Colin. All right, when was the Leaning Tower of Pisa built? Now, most of you are going to go to Google to find this, but I'm not going to give you enough time for that. Click through, show us, it's 1372. So why did we put a question about the Leaning Tower of Pisa in this presentation? So it's to illustrate the importance of foundations. So you can see that 1372, it stood for about 750 years, but the Leaning Tower of Pisa has cost a massive amount to maintain. And is, according to the New York Times, it's the most monitored monument in the world. So the point is, poor foundations equals high maintenance and high monitoring costs. Now, that's not what you want from your core IT systems. So Linus spoke about innovation, but for me, today is really about those foundations and putting the right foundations in place to manage the future. So click through, please, Colin. All right, so what's stopping organizations from putting in place strong foundations? And then building on these to solve the kind of problems that we've spoken on: lack of agility, security vulnerabilities. In a lot of cases, it's, as I've said, it's legacy systems. Now, most of you have heard the expression, data is the new oil. Now, I prefer to think about data as the lifeblood of the organization. So click, please, Colin. When data is flowing smoothly, the organization's healthy. But when the lifeblood, when the data is impeded or blocked, this becomes, as with your health, a serious problem. This is a situation we call, Colin, corporate cholesterol. Now, think about the phrase digital transformation. Now, digital transformation, it's a bit like the phrase COVID lockdown. It's a buzzword, it's overused, everybody's sick of it. But the fundamental purpose driving a digital transformation, it shouldn't be about those individual innovation use cases. It should be to unblock the flow of data around the organization, to put in place those foundations, to clear out that cholesterol and get you ready for a future where all those little red blood cells are flowing around, where you've got smart data coming in, as I said before about the IoT and then the future world of smart everything. This is where this is what will enable innovation across the business, in finance, in supply chain, in e-com, in marketing. It's not just going to be in some innovation, some X division there that you've got there. This is something that is going to solve problems across the business and the day-to-day challenges that each of those divisions faces. So who's doing this? Next slide, please, Colin. Now, this is a slide, again, it's a busy slide, but the reason I show you this slide across every industry and across every geography is because we know that the boundaries between industries are blurring. Retailers are offering financial services, banking, insurance. It's common to see a retailer offering those now. Manufacturers and distributors, they're looking at going direct to the consumer. They're looking at growing a retail arm. Media companies, they're trying to develop and produce their own content to compete with the Netflixes and others of the world. Now, putting in place strong data foundations gives you the flexibility to tweak, to be agile around your business models. But this is a retail audience, or primarily a retail audience. So let's look specifically at some of those retailers. So next slide, please, Colin. Now, you may know, you may not know, SUSE, SAP, and Google have got huge market share across these organizations. But I want to draw your attention quickly to 3 specific companies on this list. The first is Woolworths. Now, for those in Australia and New Zealand, you'll know who Woolworths is, big retailer, 200,000 employees, 60+ billion in revenue. Woolworths presented their data and analytics journey on a different, in a different forum a couple of weeks ago. And the interesting thing for me, it wasn't that they were running their group-wide data and analytics platform on Google Cloud. It was the systematic approach that they've taken over the past 3 years to get the right foundations in place. They've got those now, and this is letting them at scale, like I said before, across the business, explore AI, ML for all these different use cases. So it's not on this slide, but the second one I want to talk to you, a retailer, is actually Alphabet. And I'm wearing a Google shirt here. Alphabet's obviously the parent company to Google. Now, we're a massive retailer. We've got supply chains problems. We've got sourcing material problems. We've got marketing, sales challenges, the same as you do. If you think about what Alphabet's doing, we're also across multiple industries. So we've got an automotive division, self-driving cars with Waymo. We're a healthcare organization with Verily. We've got manufacturing, distribution, retailing. If you've got a Chromebook or a Fitbit or a Nest device or a Pixel phone, all of those are part of our retail division. So what foundations do you think Alphabet uses? They use SUSE, they use SAP, or we use SAP, and we use Google Cloud. So they are the foundational systems for Alphabet. Now, the last customer I want to talk about on this slide is Home Depot over there on the very far right. So next slide, please, Colin. So like Woolies, Home Depot has the foundations in place to innovate. They've grown their online business massively, as most of you probably have during COVID. They also manage inventory in a way that let them be flexible when COVID hit, and also to scale, to do things across multiple organizations across all of North America, USA, and Canada. Now, they're using ML models to predict things like stockouts. And here's a stat for you, it's not on the slide, but they've reduced lost sales by 16%. Yeah, that's a massive to your bottom line. Think about what that could do for your business. So I'm going to hand back to Colin now, but there are a couple of things that I want you to think about from this presentation. So first, like my friend on Valentine's Day, what is the problem that you're actually solving, and who's helping you solve that problem? And lastly, do you have the right foundations in place? So corporate cholesterol, it's a common problem. And SUSE, SAP, and Google are helping customers. We've spoken about Woolies, we've spoken about Alphabet, we've spoken about Home Depot, helping them deal with every day. So please pop some questions if you've got them. I know I haven't gone down to a technical level, happy to do that in the Q&A, but Colin, back to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Paul, for some great insight. And I think it was loud and clear the importance of laying the right foundations. I particularly like the analogy of corporate cholesterol. I think that was a good one. So now I'd just like to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Vishal Garawala. Vishal is the Chief Technology Officer for SUSE in APJ and Greater China. In his role, Vishal provides executive level engagement support for key customers and partners in the region. He represents the global office of the CTO to assess industry, market and technology trends and identify opportunities aligned with the company's strategy. Vishal has a depth of experience in cloud native technologies across industries. So I'd like to hand you over to Vishal, who is going to talk about laying the right technology foundations to give retailers the agility and flexibility they need to compete in this rapidly changing industry. It's a nice follow-on from the theme that Linus set and the foundations that Paul discussed. So I'd like to hand over to Vishal.
Hey, thank you very much, Colin, and a very good afternoon to everyone who has tuned in as well. I'd just like to follow off from what my other fellow speakers have highlighted with respect to the changes and the shifts that the retail industry has been seeing in the recent years, especially over the past 18 months. And also just highlight once again some of the key challenges that SUSE as a company have witnessed with regards to what retailers are facing. And obviously there is this greater pressure to reduce costs. Retailers are being pressured to reduce the cost even further. And there's this survey that was done by PwC in June 2021 called the Global Consumer Insights Pulse Survey, which basically focused on what customers and consumers' behaviors are. And one finding is that globally 56% of consumers today say that they are more price oriented than before, and 54% in fact of global consumers are also focused on savings. And this number is higher. It's like 70% in some of the Asian countries such as Malaysia and Philippines and Thailand. So price is becoming the dominant reason why consumers are shopping online, and it outpaces quality for most of the categories except for things like grocery, where quality is still pretty important. Now, the other thing is that we see is that the global lockdowns has obviously forced consumers to move exclusively to online storefronts and e-commerce marketplaces. And today, based on the same survey, we see that more than 50% of global consumers have become more digital. They said that they are more digital. And this trend is forcing retailers to really dial up on their digital efforts so that they keep up with consumer expectations and the rising volume of retail that we see happening through digital channels. Now, along with that, there's also a large proportion of retail transactions that are happening through mobile devices. Linus talked about omni-channel customer engagement and how do you keep customers engaged throughout the entire journey. We also have some data points that say that having an omni-channel customer engagement management strategy can see up to 91% year-over-year increase in retention rates. Which is really an awesome strategy to invest in. So with all the retailers scrambling to now deliver the best digital e-commerce experience in a way that is cost efficient for consumers, it is very crucial to have the proper technology foundation in place. And this should be a foundation that should help retailers to gain agility around how they use the most cost efficient and performant underlying infrastructure, so that they can then transfer the savings to consumers without having to compromise on performance and customer experience. The same foundation should also enable retailers to innovate rapidly, modernize existing systems so that they're in line with customers' expectations, with standard things that matter a lot to customers, right? Such as fulfillment, order fulfillment, shipping duration, tracking updates, and having a fast web performance. And finally, the technology foundation should also be able to deliver personalized experiences across the entire customer journey faster. So the good news basically is that we have such a foundation in place, all right? And this foundation is built on top of SUSE, SAP, Google Cloud, and the combined expertise and experience that we can bring, to our customers. So we already know that SAP provides an integrated suite of applications, intelligent technologies, and a digital platform for retailers to deliver, personalized customer experiences anywhere and anytime. And we also know that there are very few applications that are as mission critical for organizations as those from SAP. So, like already mentioned by Paul, SUSE and Google are working together to help customers get the most from their SAP applications in the cloud, and with a combined solution that can also help them control costs and risk while driving the organization forward. And with Google Cloud, you can now maintain the high performance and availability that SAP applications require. Combine that with SUSE, you have the best Linux operating system to support your mission critical SAP workloads. So let me elaborate further what I really mean by that. Now, SUSE Linux Enterprise Server is the market leader for SAP workloads on Linux, and it is powering some of the most mission critical use cases across the globe. And there are 4 key reasons for that, right? First and foremost, it's about improving service availability through the provision of automated service recovery and automated updates, security updates at the operating system level with no downtime at all. Secondly, it also helps you to get your SAP services deployed faster. And this is all possible through automated service deployment, as well as automated system migration to SAP S/4HANA. It also helps you to strengthen your business operations by providing you real-time access to business insights so that you can make timely SAP operational decisions with SUSE tuning and performance enhancements and optimization. And finally, you are also able to manage complex systems. And this is again made possible through automated configuration management, as well as some guided setup and update tooling that is provided by SUSE. Right. I also want to spend some time to talk about our future direction and execution deliverables, which will only cement further SLES or SUSE Linux Enterprise Server's reputation as the best Linux to support your SAP workload. So let's start by looking at the future direction, and there are 3 key areas, right? First of all, it's all around simplicity, simplifying the setup and operation of SLES to run SAP workloads on top of it. Second, it's strengthening the operating system to make it robust, reliable, fault tolerant, and highly available so that customers are able to get the best uptimes for their mission critical systems. Third is around ecosystem standardization. And here is where SUSE is driving hard to get cloud service providers, independent hardware vendors, and systems integrators to embrace SUSE technology in their own stacks. Now let's look at the second piece of the pie, which is the execution deliverable. And there are 3 key areas again. First is around tooling. So providing SAP tooling to make it easy for clients to configure SLES for SAP appropriately for their SAP workloads. Second is around high availability. And this is an area that SUSE can really provide a lot of value. SAP is always providing us with new architectures, and SUSE is going to validate and provide support for those architectures over time. We are also launching a new initiative around bundling key features and functions with the way that you operate your SAP workloads on top of SUSE, right? And one way that we are really doing that is through something known as a solution that is right now available in the beta offering. As a beta offering, it's called SUSE Linux Enterprise Server for SAP applications. And the whole reason why we are doing that is to really make it easy for you to get overall visibility with regard to your overall landscape. That's great, right? All this is great. I also want to talk a bit more about the relationship and the collaboration that we have been having with SAP over the years. It's just a long relationship, 20 years of joint collaboration and innovation that is happening with SAP. So, for example, first validated open source HA support for SAP, first validated virtualization, first Linux for SAP HANA on x86 and IBM Power machines. We were also the first to provide Linux with HA clustering for SAP NetWeaver, and also the first open source sponsor of the SAP Co-Innovation Lab. So a lot of collaboration happening over the past 20 years together with SAP. In addition to that, earlier this year, somewhere in February, we became the first enterprise Linux vendor to receive the SAP Endorse App certification. And this is really big news because it's not easy to get this certification. It's more or less invite only. But once you get this certification, customers can get really great support, high touch support, from our sales teams. So this is really great news for customers who are leveraging SLAS to power their SAP applications. And finally, the third bullet point, right? Internally, SAP also leverages SUSE to power their infrastructure. Now, as we say, right, the proof is really in the pudding, right? So if you look at some of these data points, if we look at all of the SAP applications that are out there in the market, 70% of them are running SUSE Linux, right? 85% of SAP HANA customers run on SUSE. 100% of SAP Business One version for SAP HANA run on SUSE as well. And today we have over 300 plus success stories and case studies available. So this is really a testimony to the to how much customers are really using SUSE Linux and the value that really they're getting. So far what I've talked about is the SUSE platform for SAP applications and how all of this technology can run very well on Google Cloud. But there are some other I would say add-ons that are available as well. For example, what you see here, SLE or SUSE Linux Enterprise Live Patching, and as the name says, it's the ability for you to ensure that while you're making patches, you still get the same level of business continuity and the same level of uptime. And there's also SUSE Manager that allows you to get complete visibility over your entire SAP landscape that is powered by Linux environment. Now, so far I've talked quite a bit about the SAP piece, but SUSE as a vendor is also doing quite a lot of things in the cloud native space, and both Linus and Paul talked about that. So we are also helping a lot of customers, especially customers, for example, in the retail industry, to modularize the applications, to renovate the applications, to help them get into newer cloud native architectures. And the way that we do that is through a solution that we have as part of our portfolio, which is SUSE Rancher, which is an enterprise-grade Kubernetes management platform. And with this, you will be able to build newer next-generation cloud-native applications running on top of Kubernetes, any brand of Kubernetes for that matter, any CNCF certified brand of Kubernetes, and roll this out in a consistent manner from the cloud to your on-premises to even the edge environments. And this will give retailers that much needed agility and flexibility to roll out new applications to rapidly innovate. The best news is that SUSE Rancher works very neatly with Google Cloud as well, just like how SLAS is works very well with SAP on Google Cloud. All right, so I want to also take some time to talk about a customer study. This is Office Depot, different from what Paul talked about earlier, which is he talked about Alphabet. I think he mentioned Home Depot as well. So Office Depot, it's in the digital workspace industry, and one of the challenges was that they had this multi-mix architecture environment where they're using different operating systems. So what they wanted to do is to have a way to do some level of consolidation for across the environment, and this is where they leverage SUSE Linux Enterprise and some of the additional solutions that come together with it, such as SUSE Manager, so that they are able to effectively manage the entire landscape. And some of the benefits that they are able to get now, it's that with something like SUSE Manager for retail, they are able to automatically perform in-store updates for all their in-store servers, and this it's a huge number. It's over 5,000. Previously, they were not able to do this, effectively. And they're also able to do automated patch management for over 350 of their enterprise servers. So they have been able to get a lot of simplicity with the way that they manage their environments. So that was one example, but we have a lot of customers across the globe even in the retail sector, who are leveraging SUSE technology, SUSE solutions, and helping them to achieve their mission critical use cases. All right, now let me just go and talk about the final slide, which is more about SUSE as a company. So, as a company, we have been around for over 20 years, a pure open source vendor, and some of the largest customers are leveraging our technology. And we also have strong partnerships with a lot of the hyperscalers, a lot of the major software vendors out there. Specifically, in particular, we are also doing a lot of great work with Google Cloud as well. So that's what I have to share. In short, the SUSE, Google, and SAP combination, this is a solid combination to help retailers get the agility that they need. And this is a very well engineered solution that is tried, that is tested, and it will help help retailers overcome a lot of the challenges that they are facing today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vishal, for a great overview of the technology foundations. And this lines up well with the theme that Linus has set, the reinforcement from Paul about laying the foundations. So I think we've seen three good perspectives there. So now it's time to move on to a Q&A session. So maybe if I can ask the three presenters to come back onto video, and we do have some questions that have been submitted. If you've got any other questions, please feel free to put them through in the questions panel on GoToWebinar. And so let's start, and hopefully we'll get some more questions as we go. So the first question I'd like to ask is actually for Paul, and it says, you spoke about challenges facing organisations and how to address them. In our case, the list is quite long and it's tough to know where to start. How have you seen customers starting on their data journey?
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Yeah, it's a good question and tough to answer. I mean, I spoke about Woolies during the presentation and the 3 to 4 year journey that they've been on to build out a real data and analytics capability. But I mean, we've heard here from both Linus and from Vishal, organizations don't stand still. Things come and hit you in the back of the head while you're looking in a different direction. Things like COVID and other things. So you can't stop while you're trying to get these capabilities in place. Woolies referred to it as you're an 18-wheeler barreling down the highway trying to change a tire at the same time. It's not easy. So I think the beauty of this combination is particularly what Google's got to offer is we can do some stuff in the short term as well as in the longer term. And I know from my days at SAP, I mean, SAP, some of those projects are longer term projects. And again, talking back to the foundations that we spoke about earlier. But what you can do in the short term, JB Hi-Fi is a good story. For those that don't know JB Hi-Fi, they're a retailer with physical stores and online stores across Australia. They've had an amazing COVID in terms of growth of their business and revenue. They grew revenue in one of their categories by 30 times in a single month by using Google's search recommendations AI. So this was a program that they implemented in 3 weeks, and they saw that kind of benefit. So I think to answer your question, it depends. We as Google like to show rather than tell. We'd love to come and answer your question, see what we can resolve in the short term and more in the strategic long term as well.
Okay, thanks, Paul, and hopefully that answers that question. So the next question is actually for Linus. So Linus, how are retailers responding to the business challenges this year?
Thank you, Colin. Well, this, as Paul said, there's huge amounts of just use of data and analytics as well. But when you think about what's happening as well, you know that they're, embedding tremendous amounts of data and analytics and even software capabilities in their products itself. So we're now thinking about not just products, but products and services. In some cases, in some very large industrial manufacturers, they're thinking about selling their products as services as well. And this, needs tremendous amounts of data capabilities as well. So the typical challenges that we're seeing this year, I know, it ranges from, again, very different types of retailers. Some of them are dealing with payment integration, like buy now, pay later payments. There's still a huge focus on omni-channel and order orchestration and fulfillment. We're seeing a lot more, not just software and data capabilities in products today, but much more thought around a digital product lifecycle management, as well as a sustainable product lifecycle design as well and management, because obviously consumers are much more aware about sustainability and environmental goals today. So I think these are some of the challenges that are going to be facing retailers in the coming months or so.
Thanks, Linus. Yeah, that adds a few different angles to look at it. So the next question is for Vishal. So in the SUSE presentation, it was mentioned that customers are now looking for personalised in-store experiences. How can this be achieved?
Right. Yes. So when you look at what's happening today, I mentioned that a lot of customers want to have a similar experience as throughout their journey. And when we talk about in-store experiences, it gets a bit tricky, because that means that to provide a good experience, you will need to ensure that the latency is less, so you get fast performance and fast response times. And what that generally means is that you need to have some type of server setup in, for example, a mall itself, like an edge type of an environment. And SUSE has some solutions that can help you to build such type of edge compute infrastructures and edge applications. There are two ways we support such use case. First of all, it's around how you are going to power this edge infrastructure. And we know that when it comes to edge infrastructure, it's not always, we don't always have a luxury around having a very, very high performance server that's going to be at your edge location. And that means that whatever software stack that you're using needs to be streamlined. So SUSE has built a streamlined version of its operating system. We call it SUSE Linux Enterprise Micro, that can help you, to cover this type of edge use cases. Now, in addition to that, I also talked about the Rancher management platform that you can use to build cloud native applications on top of Kubernetes. We also have a version of that is designed specifically for edge use cases. We call it Kubernetes, for the edge, or K3S, which is a streamlined version that can help you run all your cloud native applications with minimal, compute resource requirements, on the edge. So these are, two ways that, SUSE can help retailers who are looking at building edge solutions, and so that they can run, efficiently and effectively in their edge locations as well.
Thanks, Vishal. So the next question we've got is back to Google. So for Paul, the question is, Google Cloud arrived quite late to the market compared to other cloud providers. How is Google different, and why should an enterprise consider Google?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm sure you can believe I get this question a fair bit. Let me give you a slightly different example. So in 2007, Nokia and Motorola had massive market share of the mobile phone market. I think at that stage, Nokia had around 50%, or maybe a touch more than 50%, and they've been producing mobile phones for years. But in 2007, a little company called Apple released the iPhone 1. So this phone offered gaming, music, easy access to the internet, photography, and the rest is history. And I mean, it's a little bit of a cheeky answer, but we think that Google, or rather, let's go back to Alphabet. I mean, Alphabet's a data company, and we think it's access to this data and the history that we've got with billions of consumers. And hopefully everybody in the audience, you're using search, you're using maps, YouTube, Android, Chrome, you're using those every day. They're part of your everyday life. That's what we see customers coming to Google to leverage. And for those of you who can see my wrist here, Fitbit as well. So health companies and others who want to expand across industries. Just getting back to my point on foundations originally, the foundation that Alphabet's built, that Google's built to support all of those consumer-facing apps, that has been in place for years and years and years. And now we're leveraging that as part of Google Cloud for an enterprise audience. So I think to summarize, I mean, what you get from Google is everything else. It's the Alphabet family. It's those enormous data sets and our history with managing and sorting and making use of that data. That's why customers are choosing Google.
Thanks, Paul. And I think we've got time for one more question, which I'll direct to Linus. So Linus, how do we minimize risk in modernizing and moving our applications to the cloud?
Yes, so thanks for that. That's I mean that's in any migration journey, it's obviously going to be fraught with much risk. But some of the core lessons that we've learned through analyzing lots and lots of these migrations is it starts with obviously strong leadership involvement at all levels. You know, you've got to have the leadership mind to make this happen. It's not just an IT task to do so, even though there are very technical reasons to do so. I think we touched on security as one of those reasons. But then we've also got to think about it from a what I would call an opportunity to look at how, instead of just moving what you've got to the cloud, it's also an opportunity to let go of some things that you don't really need to have as well. And many businesses have gone through this journey. They realize that now is actually a time to not just move to the cloud, but modernize as well and use that opportunity to use what I would call standard application functionality, right, as they move to the cloud as well, because then they can keep the core clean. They can actually, you know, write the upgrades. They can, you know, reduce risk as well, you know, as new functionality comes on board as well. In order for all of these to happen, it's no longer a technology challenge. I think it's one of people, process, governance, you know, change management. And I think that's the significant difference that has made, you know, has made many migrations successful in the past.
Okay. Well, I think that pretty well brings us to the end of the time that we have available. So so we'll look at close the session for the day. But firstly, I'd like to thank our special guests, Paul, Linus, and Vishal. Thanks for sharing your insight today. I think you've given us three really good perspectives and that are all very well aligned. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. Thanks for taking the time. We hope you found the content useful, and the recording will be available on demand for a limited time. But thank you very much for joining. So we'll close it off now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.